Hello, Stitch 1993 here, back with another book pile for a little known book. This book is Bonhomme, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and The Huge Beast by Laurent de Brunhoff. And if you don't know who that is, the book will remind you that Laurent de Brunhoff is the author of Babar Comes to America. And he's actually the author of almost all of the Babar books, at least from 1948 to uh, looks like the late 2010s, and is still alive and kicking today as of the recording of this video in 2022. From my research here, this is actually the second book out of the two. The first one is just called Bonhomme. That was published in 1965, and this one is published almost a decade later in 1974. And let me tell you, it is the most 70s book that there can be, both from a story perspective and an art perspective. And the art perspective is what initially attached me to this book, what made me buy it from an antique store. It's just so simplistic but detailed at the same time. Simplistic in the character drawings, but of course detailed in the overall drawings and the painting. And I'm going to be honest, I have never read a single Babar book in my life. I watched the cartoon growing up. I don't know how much that compares to the books, but they do have very similar art styles, I think. But let me know down in the comments for those that are bigger Babar fans. Let me know if Bonhomme is closer to how the Babar books are illustrated or not. So, going into the story, it's very interestingly structured. So, right off the bat, this does, without saying that it did, this does say that it is a sequel book because Bonhomme, which, by the way, if you don't know, is not the giant creature on the front of this picture. No, no, no. Bonhomme is the little yellow dude sitting on the neck. The girl is also sitting is named, I want to pronounce it Emily, although it's Emilie. Emily. Again, this is all very French to America, so I don't know how well this was translated. So, Emily is going to her friend Bonhomme to just kind of hang out. And the way it's written, I want to say it's written in third person passive tone, because it's all climbed, did, but at some of the same times it's also active in its adjectives. So again, I'm not sure if that's just, again, I've never read any of the Babar books, so I'm not sure if that's just how Laurent de Brunhoff writes, or this is just a weird translation. So you will have to excuse me if I'm just not the most accustomed to his way of writing. And the story is a little all over the place too. It does follow a pretty simple story structure. There's not a whole bunch of stories, but it's not a point A to point B book, I would say. So the story, as it goes, Emily goes and meets with Bonhomme. Uh, Emily invites Bonhomme to come home with her, but Bonhomme reminds her, and I guess this happened in the first book, that last time he did that, they put a cork on his spike. And at first, I was very confused at what they called a spike, because, but apparently it's this little line on the top of his head. I thought that was a hair. It honestly looks more like a hair. So again, I don't know if that's a translation or what, but yeah, apparently that is a very sharp spike that they put a cork on, and he did not like that. So he declines at first, but Emily kind of begs him, and finally Bonhomme says, "Alright, fine." So they go home, and Bonhomme tells stories just to kind of pass the time. And eventually he tells a story about this pink house out in the forest, but he doesn't tell Emily, who lives in there, what they do. So the next morning, Bonhomme takes her out to the forest, and they first come upon a snail that says, "Have you seen my friend Randolph? He is missing." So they're like, "Well, we'll go and help you find your friend." But first, they go to the pink house, and they find this giant creature that lives there, and the giant creature's name is Randolph. So, yeah, for me, I would think the little white dude was called Randolph, and the bigger creature would be Bonhomme. But for my French English people, let me know, one, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, and then two, let me know if the Bonhomme name is just kind of a basic name or if it is some sort of fantasy like name. Because honestly, I feel like I know this is the sequel book, but it just feels more like the white guy would be named Rainoff and the bigger creature would be named the Bonhomme. But that's just me, as American, as we like to call the weird fantasy creatures weird fantasy names. And Bonhomme sounds like a weird fantasy name. No offense to anybody if your name is Bonhomme. So they meet with Bonhomme, they meet with Randolph, and the snail comes along, and they have fun playing games. They find out that Randolph has in his shell. He carries a telephone, so he's able to call up some friends. So they call up the stone horse and the large frog, which were two of the characters that were in Bonhomme and Emily's stories, and they are real. So I'm assuming that just all the creatures in these stories are real that Bonhomme tells Emily and vice versa. And they all have fun and games. Bonhomme and Emily fly on Randolph's back. Randolph can also sprout flowers out of his back. Then they get into a race, but the stone horse is, of course, made of stone, so he trips and falls and breaks. But Randolph and the large frog and the snail glue him back together. And then eventually Emily gets homesick, so, of course, Randolph offers to fly her home. And she says, "That's fine, but I want to take the stone horse home." So they do, and then they go back to Bonhomme's home first and play some more there, and then eventually Emily goes home at the end of the book. So yeah, it's a very interesting story, I would say. If I had to give it a grade level, I'd probably give it a first or second grade level. They're nothing too hard for really any novice reader to grab hold to. They'll probably be more confused, if anything, of the story or the writing structure, honestly, than anything else. Would still highly recommend checking this book out just for the illustrations itself. And of course, if you are a Babar fan, just to check it out, see his Lawrence other work. So, and yeah, so comment down in the comments section, of course, of if you grew up with this book, if I am pronouncing the character's name correctly, any of the characters' names correctly, and if you read the first one, and if the first one was any more interesting than this one was. And I don't know if in France is the Bonhomme as noticeable as Babar, or was it just kind of a 1-2 off thing where the books came out and nobody really paid attention to them, or if there's a cult following of any sort. I'd really like to know. And of course, let me know down in the comments as well of any other books you'd like me to review or give my thoughts on. And of course, like and subscribe for future videos. And until next time, thank you and have a good day.